All right, Errol, thank you so much. A day of celebration and joy in Israel as all living hostages held by Hamas are free after 2 years in captivity. They were rushed to hospitals in Israel, some waving flags to cheering crowds. But the bodies of 28 slain hostages, they are still in Gaza. Now, emotional reunions were seen today as families were able to finally greet their loved ones after 738 days. The hostages were handed over to the Red Cross in 2 waves. First 7, and then the remaining 13 were finally on their way home again after 2 years in captivity. They are the last of the more than 250 hostages taken by Hamas in the October 7th attacks. Now, after Hamas released the Israelis, busloads of freed Palestinians headed to the West Bank. Israel says as part of the deal, 1,700 detained during the war will be sent back to Gaza and 250 prisoners who were serving life sentences. Now, after the hostages were released, President Donald Trump addressed Israel's parliament, declaring a historic dawn of a new Middle East. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Trump the greatest friend in the White House that Israel has ever had. Trump touted his U.S. brokered peace agreement as key to lasting peace in the region.
It's the granddaddy of them all, and in an unprecedented achievement, virtually the entire region has endorsed the plan that Gaza will be immediately demilitarized, that Hamas will be disarmed, and Israel's security will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form.
CBS News Chief White House correspondent is in Egypt right now, where the president is. Nancy, thank you for joining us. Before we get to the president's address to the Knesset, let's talk about his comments that he just made at the peace summit there. What are your takeaways from what he had to say?
Well, he was talking, Ugo, about the nuts and bolts of the plan that he wants to work out with the dozens of world leaders who have all flown here to Sharm el-Sheikh on short notice to sit down with him and hammer out the fine print. You know, he has this 20-point peace plan that Israel and Hamas have agreed to, but there are a lot of details that are left unwritten, and those details have to do with how and when Israel would withdraw its military from Gaza, how Gaza would be rebuilt, who would pay for it, what kind of international stabilization force could then come into Gaza to help keep the peace until Gazans can protect themselves, and on and on. So President Trump said just a few moments ago that he is going to be looking towards wealthy nations in the region to pony up and pay to help rebuild Gaza quickly. He said this is about more than just peace between Israel and Gaza. It's about peace in the Middle East writ large, and that means addressing the issue of Iran at some point as well.
Yeah, but as you just laid out there, still a lot of questions remain. Let's turn to the president's address to Israel's parliament. He called this a new dawn for the Middle East. Will what he said be key in the peace process moving forward?
Yes, one message that he sent to the leaders of the Israeli parliament was, you won. You have gotten the hostages back. You have achieved your aims, and now it is time to focus on peace. Take the battles that you have fought and died for, and use that victory in the service of peace. There's a great deal of concern, Mugo, that that this ceasefire won't hold, that either the Israelis or Hamas will try to back out at some point. And so the focus is on how to keep this peace deal on track, how to turn a fragile ceasefire into a permanent end to the war. And that was the message that President Trump brought with him to the Middle East.
All right. Nancy Corda is in Egypt for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And in Israel, tearful reunions as hostage families were reunited with loved ones. This mother and son here embracing after his release from 738 days in captivity. You can only imagine what that moment feels like. The family thanked soldiers who have lost their lives in the war as they begin the road to healing. In Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, crowds cheered as word came of the release of the first wave of hostages. Many waited for hours for the announcement. Israel's hostage coordinator also promised to form a task force to help find the remains of any slain hostages that Hamas cannot locate. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Debora Patta is in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Here, as you can imagine, jubilation. And when the hostages were released, tears and hugs. People here have campaigned long and hard for this moment, lived through heartbreak and rage. And although they kept hope alive, there were often times they thought this day would never happen. The 20 living hostages were released by Hamas from 2 separate locations, and after being handed over by the Red Cross to the Israeli military inside Gaza, they were taken to an army base and reunited with their families. And so the clock finally stops at 738, the number of days in captivity. But for the families today, it is filled with firsts. The first longed-for reunion, the first embrace, the first screams of joy, and sadly another first, the first day of mourning for loved ones killed in captivity. President Trump also arrived this morning in Israel to a hero's welcome and then addressed the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, saying it was a great day and a new beginning. 250 Palestinian prisoners serving life sentences and around 1,900 detainees arrested since October 23 have also been set free today. And the ceasefire deal is a lifeline for Gazans. Desperately needed aid can finally flow into the territory to help ease the dire humanitarian crisis. The images of the sheer scale of the destruction defy description. Back to you.
Debora Patta, thank you. And we are joined now by Edward Djerejian. He is a former U.S. ambassador to Israel. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on 24/7 today. President Trump is calling the peace agreement the dawn of a new Middle East. This U.S. brokered agreement, do you think it can set the stage for lasting peace in the region?
Yes, I think the potential is there. This is a great achievement in terms of the release of the Israeli hostages, the release of Israeli prisoners, a ceasefire, and all the immediate steps that your commentators have mentioned on the next steps going forward to stabilize Gaza. If the ceasefire holds, if Gaza is stabilized, if an interim government is put in place with the necessary security measures, that will be a first step forward for serious attention being given to a more permanent solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This conflict, the root of this conflict is the need for self-determination of a Palestinian state by the Israelis, and on the Palestinian side, the full recognition of Israel's self-determination as a state and a coexistence of both to work together. This is the goal, I believe, of President Trump's next steps, the stage that he is setting up now as we speak in Cairo. It's fragile. The ceasefire may not hold. There may be violations. But the important thing is that the geopolitical terrain in the Middle East has shifted since October 7th. And I think there's a real opportunity for peacemaking.
Wow. Okay. So, Ambassador, we know Trump received standing ovations and even claps as he was out there. There is dissent, though. We have to mention that in the Knesset, because some members are calling for a recognition of a Palestinian state. What could that mean moving forward?
Well, that's the core of the problem. October 7th brought the Palestinian issue to the forefront of not only the regional Middle East agenda, but of the world, as we're seeing in demonstrations all over the world, and in terms of the major efforts being made to get a ceasefire in Gaza. So what this means is that there is an opportunity, but it's going to take a great deal of statecraft. It's going to take hard work, patience to get the two sides. And my own personal view is that nothing is going to happen in terms of forward movement on an Israeli-Palestinian agreement unless there are new elections in Israel and a government comes into power in Israel that is ready to negotiate an Israeli-Palestinian agreement and new elections in Palestine, that the Palestinian Authority has to be renewed with new leadership that comes to the fore that will reach out to Israel to negotiate peace. So the road ahead is going to be long, and I hope that the Trump administration continues to build on what it's achieved and has the patience and exercises the statecraft to go forward.
And you talked about the powers that be in the Middle East all coming together for this moment. Why do you think it's taken this long to get those leaders on the table?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of missteps. There's been a lot of missed opportunities. Frankly, this ceasefire and exchange of hostages for prisoners could have been achieved about a year ago. The plans were on the table, but the political will simply wasn't there. I think another important fact is that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel decided that he would opt for the military route, not only against Hamas, but in Lebanon against Hezbollah, against the Houthis, against Iran. Now, as President Trump has said, I think this is very important that in his speech, he said, the phase of military operations is basically over. Now the phase for negotiations and diplomacy is here. That's a strong signal to the Israelis that the United States wants to move forward on negotiations.
Okay, Ambassador Djerejian, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights.